Hey, old-timer. You lost? The bus tours don't come back this far, so unless you're somebody's grandpa who wandered off the parking lot, you are standing behind the wrong rope. The voice belonged to Sergeant Cole Doran, and it carried the easy cruelty of a man who had never once been wrong in front of an audience. He stood at the head of the firing line in fresh-pressed camis, 26 years old, sleeves squared, sunglasses pushed up into hair that had never seen a bad year. Behind him, 4 Scout sniper trainees lay prone in the dirt, rifles trained downrange, and beyond them, the steel target sat at 800 meters and refused, again and again, to ring. The wind came off the ridge in long, dishonest pushes, full value, left to right, then dropping to nothing for half a breath before it shoved again. It had beaten the class all afternoon. 4 shooters, a dozen rounds, and not one clean hit. Only the flat, hollow clap of bullets striking the berm a hand's width wide of the plate. Each miss raised a small puff of pale dust against the dirt, and each puff was a little to the right of where the last instructor's confidence had said it would be. The old man behind the rope did not answer the sergeant. He sat on an overturned cooler in a faded utility cap and a field jacket gone soft and pale at the seams, and he watched the target the way other men watched the sea. He was 79 years old. His hands rested on his knees without a tremor. His eyes did not move to Doran at all. They stayed on the boil of heat, rising off the grass between the line and the steel, reading something there that no one else on the range could see. "Half a mil left," the old man said. He said it quietly, to himself, the way a man reads a road sign aloud out of long habit. "The mirage is lying to you. It's pushing harder than it looks." Lance Corporal Marquez, 20 years old and prone at the near firing point, heard it. He turned his head off the stock and stared. He had just thrown his round a hand's width right of plate, exactly where the old man's words said it would go, and the coincidence sat wrong in his chest, like a clock chiming a second before you look at it. Doran heard the murmur too, and his grin widened. He had found his entertainment for the afternoon. "Oh, we got a coach. We got a real coach back here." He swept an arm toward the old man for the benefit of his trainees. "Range tourists usually stay up front by the gift shop, sir. You here to teach my Marines how to shoot? Because they've got 8 weeks of school, and you've got a Velcro wallet and orthopedic shoes, so I like our odds." The trainees laughed, because trainees laugh when the instructor laughs. The old man let it pass over him like weather. He did not rise. He did not bristle. He looked at the flag snapping on its pole, then at the dry grass bending in the lull, then back at the shimmer above the dirt, and his lips moved once, silently, counting something the rest of them could not hear. Up in the tower, Master Gunnery Sergeant Frank Okafor lowered his coffee. Okafor was 55 and had run this range for 9 years, and he had built a quiet science out of watching men under pressure. What snagged his attention was not the field jacket and not the cap. It was the stillness. The old man sat the way a rock sits in a river, not waiting, not enduring, simply unmoved, while everything loud rushed past him. Okafor had seen that stillness in exactly 2 kinds of men in his life, and one of those 2 kinds was dead. He set the coffee down and did not pick it up again. "The gust is coming," the old man said. "It'll peak, then it'll drop. 3 seconds. 2. There." And on the word, the wind let go. The grass straightened. The flag fell slack against the pole. For one long held moment, the whole range went calm, and into that calm, far down the line where a lone trainee had been holding too long on a follow-up shot, a rifle cracked, and 800 meters away the steel rang. One clean note, the only ring of steel all afternoon, and it had come from a target no one had meant to hit, in the exact window the old man had called out loud. Doran's grin stayed fixed, but it had stopped reaching his eyes. He glanced downrange, then back at the cooler, then made himself laugh. "Lucky," he announced, to no one and everyone. "Even a broke clock's right twice a day, right, fellas?" The old man said nothing. He folded his hands again and watched the mirage rebuild itself over the dirt, the way a man watches an old friend walk back into a room. Marquez kept staring at him a moment longer than the others. Then he put his cheek back on the stock, and for the first time that afternoon, he stopped fighting the gust and waited for the lull instead. And he did not know why, except that the old man on the cooler had made him feel, suddenly and absurdly, like the only amateur on the line. The class shot for another 20 minutes, and the steel stayed silent, and Sergeant Doran's patience curdled into the kind of performance that needs a target. He found his target on the cooler. "Watch this," he told his trainees, loud enough to carry. "Coach is gonna call the next one for us. Go ahead, Pop. Where's Henderson gonna hit?" The old man's eyes moved to the prone trainee at the third point and took their slow inventory. The set of his shoulders, the white of his knuckles on the grip, the way his trigger finger lay too deep in the guard, jointed against the metal instead of laid flat along it. "He'll drop low and right," the old man said. "He's milking the grip, strangling it. A rifle goes where the hand tells it, and his hand is telling it to go low and right." Henderson fired. The round struck the berm low and right, a hand's width off plate, precisely where the words had put it. Nobody laughed this time. Marquez sat up off his rifle entirely and looked back over his shoulder. "Lucky again," Doran said, but the word had gone thin in his mouth, and he knew it, and that knowledge made him louder. The old man wasn't listening to him. A trainee at the near point had set his rifle down across the mat, with the muzzle wandering toward the line, careless the way tired men get careless, and without looking, without seeming even to decide to do it, the old man reached over the rope, took the rifle by the small of the stock, rolled the muzzle safely downrange, swept the bolt back to confirm the chamber clear, eased it home, and set the weapon down again. His hands knew the rifle the way other men's hands knew their own faces. He had not glanced at it once. He had been watching the flag the entire time. Okafor came down out of the tower. He crossed behind the line slow and easy, the way you approach something you are not yet sure of. And he stopped a respectful distance from the cooler. "Afternoon," he said. "You served, didn't you? Where'd you serve, Pop?" The old man considered the question the way he considered the wind, without hurry, giving it exactly its due and not a word more. "A while ago," he said. "Different rifles, heavier scopes. We did the math in our heads back then, with a grease pencil if we were lucky." It was not an answer, and Okafor knew it was not an answer, and that told him more than an answer would have. Real ones never led with it. The loud ones led with it. He looked at the field jacket again, at the fated place over the breast where something had once been pinned and wasn't pinned now. The cloth a shade lighter there in the shape of a small device, and at the man's eyes, which were the calm, flat gray of a sky that had seen every kind of weather and been impressed by none of it. "Sergeant Doran," Okafor said, not loudly, "ease off the man." But Doran had an audience and a sergeant's stripes and the unshakable certainty of a man who has never yet met the thing that would break it. "Master Guns, with respect, I'm running a relay here. I can't have civilians coaching my students mid-string. He's confusing them." He turned back to his trainees and spread his hands, performing again. "Look, I'm sure he did his time. Mailroom, motor pool, peeling spuds. Somebody's gotta. Doesn't make him a shooter." The old man's gaze had drifted past all of them. It had found the brass plaque bolted to the base of the tower, the range's wall of honor, the names and the records of the men the school chose to remember. He looked at it the way you look at a face in an old photograph that you were not expecting to find. His eyes settled on one line, one name, one number, and they stayed there a beat too long, and something in his weathered face went very quiet and very far away. None of the trainees had ever read that plaque. It was just brass to them, the kind of thing that hangs on every range in the Corps. They had walked past it 800 times without slowing down. Okafor saw where the old man was looking, and the back of his neck began to prickle, the way it does when the body knows a thing the mind has not yet said out loud. By the time the class rotated to fresh targets, the old man on the cooler had become the afternoon's running joke, and Sergeant Doran ran it the way he ran everything, out front, loud, certain it could not turn on him. "Gather up," he told the trainees during the ceasefire, and they clustered, glad of the break, glad of the show. "I want you to meet a legend. This is, what do we call him? The General. The General's gonna grade our targets today." He bowed, theatrical, sweeping the cover off his own head and replacing it. "General, sir, honored to have you." The trainees laughed. One of them asked, straight-faced, whether the old man needed help finding his tour bus, whether it left from the front gate or from out by the exchange. Another wanted to know if he could even see the target from back there. "Blink twice if the berm's still standing, Gramps. We don't want you to strain anything important." A third leaned in, emboldened by the first two, and asked if the old man's outfit had even had rifles, or whether they'd issued him a musket and a powder horn. The cluster of them swayed with it, the way a crowd of young men sways when one of their own is conducting, and Doran stood at the front of it conducting, arms wide, soaking up the laughs he had set loose. None of them noticed that the old man's eyes had not once joined the joke. They were still out on the wind, still on the grass, still doing patient arithmetic that none of them had been alive long enough to learn. The old man answered the question that had been buried inside the joke, because it was the only part of it worth answering. 800 meters to the plate, he said. Maybe 810. Wind's full value off the ridge, 9 to 12 miles an hour in the gusts, dropping to 3 in the lulls. You're holding for the average. That's why you keep missing all afternoon. There is no average. There's only the wind that's actually there in the half second the round leaves the barrel. And that wind doesn't care what your data book says. For a moment, nobody spoke, because it was the most precise thing anyone had said on that line all day, and some of them were young enough to feel the difference. Then Doran laughed, loud, to break it. Listen to him, still calling wind like it's 1965. Pop, the war's over. You won. Go home, put your feet up, let the young guys carry the weight now. I'm sure that's right, the old man said mildly. He did not sound stung. He sounded like a man agreeing about the weather with a stranger at a bus stop. About the war, I mean. You're wrong about the wind, though. The wind never signed any treaty. Marquez did not laugh. He had stopped laughing 2 missed targets ago. He stood at the edge of the cluster with his cover in his hands and watched the old man, the way you watch a man you have started to suspect. You have badly, badly misjudged. And he glanced up at Okafor by the tower, and Okafor's face told him nothing and everything at once. The old man drank from a plastic water bottle, slow, and watched the flag, and watched the grass lie down and stand up, and said nothing more. His calm had stopped reading, even to the trainees, like the calm of a man who did not understand what was happening to him. It had started to read, instead, like the calm of a man who understood it considerably better than they did, and was choosing to be patient about it. If you have ever watched the young forget what the old once paid for them, stay with this one, and subscribe to the Veteran Vault. The ceasefire ended. The trainees drifted back to their points and settled onto their rifles, and the old man on the cooler said, quietly, to no one at all, "He's not wrong about the war, but that gust is coming back in 4, 3, 2. The wind hit the flag on the count, full and hard, exactly as he'd said, and snatched a trainee's round a clean foot off the plate. And the old man closed his eyes for a moment in the warm sun, like a man listening to a song that only he could hear, a song the rest of them had never been taught. Sergeant Doran could feel it slipping, the way a man feels the floor of a thing he has built start to soften under his own weight, and like most men in that moment, he chose to push harder instead of stepping back off it. "All right," he said, rounding on the cooler with a grin stretched a size too tight. "All right, General. You've been calling everybody's shots all day, cataracts and orthopedics and all. So let's see it. 800 meters. Cold bore, 1 round, just you and a rifle, in front of God and these Marines. Show us how it's done." He spread his arms wide. "Show us the legend in the flesh." It was meant to end it. It was meant to be the moment the old man mumbled an excuse and shuffled back toward the parking lot, and Doran got his afternoon back with interest. Instead, the old man looked at him for the first time. Really looked at him. A long, steady appraisal that took in the squared sleeves and the unscuffed boots and the sunglasses parked in the hair. And there was no anger in it anywhere. There was something worse than anger. There was patience. "You don't want me to do that, son," the old man said. "Not really. You only think you do. There's a difference between the two, and you're about to learn it the hard way." "Oh, I really do." Doran turned a slow circle, taking in his trainees, milking the moment for all of it. "Come on, fellas. Who wants to see the general put one downrange? Who wants the story? You'll be telling your grandkids about the day the old-timer showed the whole school how it's done." The trainees grinned, uneasy now, but unwilling to be the one who broke ranks first. Doran jerked his chin at the nearest of them. "Give him a rifle. Go on. Let's make his whole year for him." The trainee, half laughing, half uneasy, caught between his sergeant and the thing in the air, pulled his weapon off the mat, crossed the rope, and pushed it flat against the old man's chest, muzzle up and safe but shoved hard. A dare made out of steel and aluminum and the cruelty of the young. "There you go, Gramps. Try not to drop it." The old man's hands came up and took it, and the laugh died in the trainee's throat, because the rifle came to him the way a tool returns to the hand that wore it smooth. There was no fumbling, no searching. His left hand found the balance point without looking for it. His right settled at the grip with the trigger finger laid flat and high along the receiver, indexed and disciplined, exactly where 8 weeks of school had been trying and failing to teach these boys to put theirs. He did not bring it to his shoulder. He simply held it, correctly, completely, the way a man holds a thing he has held 10,000 times in the dark, and the holding of it said more than any shot ever could. For 1 second, Doran's grin faltered, because some old animal part of him recognized exactly what he was looking at, even as the front of his mind slammed the door on it. Then he reversed himself, fast, the way frightened men do when their bodies are quicker than their pride. "You know what? No, forget it. Give it back. Master Guns'll have my stripes if you hurt yourself out here." He reached for the rifle. "Off the line, Pop. Come on, before you fall down, and we've all got to stand around filling out paperwork on you." It was contempt wearing the borrowed mask of safety, and every Marine on that line heard it for exactly what it was. The old man held the rifle a moment longer, then handed it back without a word. But first, muzzle controlled, correct even in surrender. As the trainee carried it away, the old man looked downrange one final time. "Full value, right to left," he said, to no one in particular. "Hold 1.5 mil. Break it on the lull, not the gust. That's the shot you've all been missing since lunch." Nobody moved to take the correction. Nobody quite dared. Up at the tower, Master Gunnery Sergeant Okafor had gone very still, and then he turned and walked the few steps to the brass plaque, and bent to read a line he had passed 9 years of mornings without ever truly reading. The plaque was old, and the brass had gone dark in the cut of the lettering, and Okafor read it the way you read a telegram, one word at a time, feeling each one land in turn. A name. A unit. 1st Marine Division Scout Sniper Platoon. A record. Cut in beneath. The longest confirmed cold-bore engagement in the school's logged history. 840 meters. Single round, 1968. And a call sign in parentheses after the name, the way the old logs always used to do it. He read the call sign and the blood went out of his face, and he straightened up slowly and turned around and looked at the old man on the cooler with entirely new eyes. The eyes of a man who has just realized the relic he was being polite to is a saint. He knew the story. Every man who had ever pinned on the Scout Sniper title knew the story, the way you know a thing that has hardened into legend long before you arrive. The 840-meter shot in the gray light, the 3-day stalk, the bounty the enemy had hung on a ghost they could never lay eyes on. It was the kind of story instructors told new students on the first night to make their own ambitions feel small. Okafor had told it himself more than once, standing right where Doran was standing now, and he had never once thought to wonder whether the man in the story was still drawing breath somewhere, in a faded jacket, in a parked truck, 4 hours up the road. Then he crossed the line fast, putting his own body between Doran and the rope. "Sergeant," he said, low and flat, all the parade deck stripped out of the voice. "You want to stop talking, right now, while you still can." Doran blinked. To be corrected was one thing. To be corrected in that voice, in front of his own trainees, was another thing entirely. "Master Guns, I'm just running my—" "You don't know who that is." Okafor's eyes did not leave the old man for an instant. "I'm starting to, and when I'm sure, you are going to wish to God you had bitten your tongue clean off before you opened your mouth on my range today." The old man met Okafor's look, and for the first time, something almost like regret moved across his face. "I didn't come here to make a point, Master Guns," he said quietly. "I want you to know that much. I drove 4 hours this morning because they're closing my section of the old base next month, and I wanted to see this range one more time before they put a bulldozer through it. That's the whole of it. I sat down on a cooler in the shade. I didn't come to embarrass anybody's boy in front of his students." He glanced at Doran, and there was no malice in it anywhere. "So let it go. Let me go. I'll get in my truck, and you'll never lay eyes on me again. And the sergeant can have his afternoon back, and we'll all pretend the old man never showed up." It was the most decent thing anyone had said on that range all day, and Doran, God help him, heard it and took it for weakness. "See," Doran said, finding his footing again, playing once more to the trainees who had gone very quiet. "Even he knows. He's leaving. Good. The range is for shooters, not for—" "For who, Sergeant?" Okafor turned on him at last, and the whole line flinched as one. "Go on. Finish it. Say the word out loud, so these Marines can remember exactly what you said today. Because I promise you, they are going to remember this afternoon for the rest of their natural lives, every last detail of it. And you don't yet understand why." Doran's jaw worked. He did not finish it. But he did not back down either. He was too far out on the limb now, with 20 pairs of young eyes fixed on him, and a man like Doran would rather break clean off than climb down where people could watch him do it. "He shoots, or he leaves," he said, stubborn, jaw set hard. "Those are the only 2 options on my line. Coaching from the cheap seats stops now." Okafor looked at him for a long moment, and what was in his face was no longer anger. It was something closer to pity, the helpless pity of a man watching another man dig, with tremendous energy and total conviction, his own grave, and refuse every hand that reaches down to stop him. What the boy in the pressed blouse did not know is what the next 10 minutes would carve into him for good. Subscribe to the Veteran Vault so you do not miss it. The old man rose from the cooler then, slowly, joints unfolding one by one with the deliberate economy of age, and he did not turn toward the parking lot. He stood, and he looked downrange at the steel and at the wind moving in the grass, and something in the set of his shoulders had quietly changed, and Okafor, watching it happen, felt the back of his neck go cold in the warm afternoon. He had learned stillness in a place where motion was death, and the lesson never once left the body that learned it. 1968, the Quezon Hills, west of the lowlands, where the elephant grass grew higher than a standing man, and the heat sat down on the earth like a flat hand. Corporal Raymond Vance was 21 years old, and he had been moving toward a single ridgeline for 60 hours, and in those 60 hours, he had covered less than 2,000 meters, because that was simply how long it took to move 2,000 meters and still be alive at the end of it, a foot at a time, a breath at a time, the grass moving only with the wind and never, ever with him. Behind him, close enough to touch and never once speaking above the drone of insects, came Lance Corporal Tully, his spotter, 19 years old, from a town in Ohio, given to whispering bad jokes at the worst possible moments. They had been a team for 7 months, which in that place was a marriage and a whole lifetime folded into one. Tully read the wind and the range and the dope. Vance read the trigger. Between the two of them, they had become a single instrument, and the men across these valleys had learned to fear the instrument the way farmers fear weather, and had given it a name. The radio net called him Longbow. The men on the other side of the wire called him the Gray Ghost, and they had put a price on his head that climbed every month, because you cannot easily collect a bounty on a thing that you have never managed to see. On the third morning, in the gray before first light, the target came up the far trail exactly where the intelligence had promised he would. A column commander whose decisions had already cost a great many young Marines a great deal. The valley measured 840 meters across. The brass would later refuse to log the distance without 2 confirming witnesses, because no one at headquarters believed a man could make that shot on purpose. Wind switching, Tully breathed, his lips barely moving in the grass. Quartering now. Off the cook-fire smoke from the village. You see it lie down? It's gonna lie down for you. You've got a window, Gunny. 3 breaths. Maybe 4. Vance did not answer him. He had stopped being a man with a name and a hometown. He was the rifle, and the rifle was him. And between them there was only the wind, and the wind was lying itself down off the village smoke, and he laid the reticle into the patch of air where the target was going to be, rather than the place where it stubbornly was, and he let his breath out halfway and held it in the still hollow between one heartbeat and the next. "You make the shot, Gunny," Tully whispered, the way he always did, half a prayer and half a joke to keep them both human. "I'll keep us breathing." The trigger broke on its own, the way it does when it is done right, and you are not truly the one breaking it. The rifle spoke a single time across the valley. 840 meters away, in the gray light, the thing they had crawled 3 days for was finished, and the morning went very still. And then, the morning came apart at the seams. They were compromised on the extraction. It is always the extraction. The shot buys you nothing at all if the ground between you and the rest of the world has quietly filled in behind you. And it had. Coming back off the ridge, in the bad gray light, the air gone solid with green tracer, Tully went down beside him without a single sound, which was the worst way of all, because the ones who scream are the ones still arguing with it. Vance carried him. He carried a man who had stopped being able to keep either of them breathing, 3 days back the way they had come, through the same grass, at the same impossible inching pace, because to hurry was to die, and to leave him was a thing that simply could not be done. He did the math in his head the entire way, range and wind and azimuth, anything, any number at all, to keep the part of his mind that was screaming from being heard out loud. They gave him the Navy Cross for the Quezon Hills. He never once felt that he had earned it, because medals are handed out for the man you managed to kill, and never for the man you couldn't manage to save. And the arithmetic of that exchange had refused to balance for him, not in one single morning across 58 years of mornings. On the range, in the present, in the live afternoon wind, the old man's thumb moved once across a worn, pale place on the borrowed rifle's stock. The same small motion, the same old grief, carried so long now that it had become a quiet part of the hand itself. Sergeant Doran, who had never in his life been able to leave a thing alone, crossed the rope. He did it for the trainees, and he did it because the silence had become unbearable to a man who lived his whole life by filling silences. And he reached out and flicked the faded utility cap off the old man's head so that it tumbled into the churned dirt of the firing line. "There," he said, with a laugh that came out a half step higher than he had meant it to. "No more general, just an old man who needs to go home now. Come on, Pop, walk of shame. I'll even carry your cooler for—" He never finished it, because the old man turned his head and looked at him. That was all. He did not raise a hand. He did not raise his voice by a single decibel. He simply turned and let his calm, gray eyes settle full on Sergeant Cole Doran, and something moved behind them that had nothing whatsoever to do with age. Something that had lain perfectly still and perfectly patient all afternoon, the way a deep, cold current lies still beneath the flat, bright surface of a sea. And the wind itself seemed to hold its breath, and every Marine on that line felt the temperature of the whole day drop without being able to say why. Doran took a step backward. He did not decide to take it. His body took it for him. The old animal part of him that had recognized a predator in the grass, a full second before his pride would allow his mind to admit any such thing existed. The grin was gone from his face entirely now. He had gone pale beneath the range tan. For a long moment, nobody on the line breathed. Marquez had taken a half step forward without meaning to, one hand half raised, as if to put himself between the sergeant and whatever he had just woken up. Down the line, a trainee lowered his phone, then thought better of it and raised it again, because some part of him understood he was filming something he would want proof of later. Okafor's voice cracked across the silence like a round going off. "Everybody stand fast. Sergeant, you do not move." But the old man had already let it go. The look drained out of his eyes the way a tide goes out, leaving the flat gray calm behind, and the danger that had filled the air a heartbeat ago folded itself quietly back down into the body of an old man in a faded jacket. And the only proof it had ever been there at all was the color that had left Cole Doran's face and had not yet come back. The old man bent, slowly, with the stiff, unhurried dignity of his years, and picked his cap up out of the dirt, and dusted it once against his thigh, and settled it back down on his head. And when he straightened, the thing behind his eyes had banked back down into embers, and his voice, when it came, was quiet and almost gentle. "All right," he said. "One round. Then I'll go, and you'll never see me again, just like I promised you." He looked at Doran, and then he looked past him at the trainees, at Marquez, at all those young upturned faces. "But you're gonna watch this one, son. All of you are. Not because I've got one single thing left in this world to prove to anybody. Because you have never actually seen it done. Not really. You've seen it on a phone screen, slowed down, with music under it. You've never once seen it in the wind, with your own 2 eyes, 800 meters, stone cold. So watch close. You might need to know with your own eyes that it's possible, some bad morning a long way from here." Okafor was already moving. He crossed to the armory rack himself and drew a rifle. A good one, the school's best glass, zeroed that week. And he loaded a single round into the chamber with his own 2 hands, and he carried it to the firing point and laid it down on the mat with a care that made the trainees go silent, because not one of them had ever in their short careers seen the range master handle a weapon like an offering laid on an altar. "Conditions, Master Guns," the old man said, lowering himself down to the mat joint by joint, until at last he lay prone behind the rifle. And as his weathered cheek came down onto the stock, the whole line felt the air itself change, felt the afternoon stop being a joke that anyone was telling and become, instead, a thing they would each one day tell their own trainees about, 20 years on, and have those trainees not quite believe them. He settled. There is a thing that happens to a true shooter behind a rifle, and every Marine on that line watched it happen to the old man, and not one of them would ever afterward be able to put it into words. He did not tense up. He let go. The years seemed to run off him like rainwater off oilcloth. His breathing slowed and lengthened, and then very nearly stopped, and his body sank into the dirt and became a part of it, and the rifle stopped being a separate object held in his hands, and the wind, the same wind that had beaten 4 trainees and a sergeant up and down this line all afternoon long, became, on his lips, nothing more than a thing he was reading quietly aloud. "Full value, right to left, 9 in the gust," he murmured, and no one was entirely sure he was even speaking to them. "She's pushing the mirage, leaning on it. Don't you trust the mirage? The mirage lies. Watch the grass instead. The grass tells the truth. Hold 1.5 mil, and you don't break it on the gust." His finger took up the first slack out of the trigger. "You break it on the lull. You wait for her to lie all the way down. Everybody out here's in a hurry. The wind has never once been in a hurry. So you wait on her. You wait." The flag stood straight out hard from the pole. The grass bent flat to the ground. The gust peaked. And then, exactly as it had done all afternoon, exactly as he had promised, 3 separate times to people who had laughed at every promise, the wind began to die. The flag softened. The grass came slowly back up off the dirt. And in the held, breathless hollow of that lull, between one heartbeat and the next one, the rifle spoke. For a half-second there was nothing at all. 800 meters is a long way for sound to travel back to the man who sent it. Then the steel rang. It rang once, clean and full and final, dead center of the plate. The note carrying back down the line and out over the berm and into the suddenly enormous silence, and the sound, carried like a verdict, read in a quiet courtroom. Down the firing points, the spotting scopes were already locked hard on the plate, and one by one the trainees called it, in voices gone strange and small. "Center. Dead center. First round. Cold bore. 800 meters. He called his own wind, and he—" The voice that said it ran out of words. For a moment, no one moved at all. The old man worked the bolt, caught the spent brass in his open palm out of 58 years of unbroken habit, and laid it down gently on the mat beside the rifle, the small ringing of it against the metal, the only sound on the line. He did not look up. He did not look at Doran. He did not look at anyone. He had made his shot, and he was already somewhere else, somewhere none of them had ever been. Master Gunnery Sergeant Okafor found his voice. It came out hoarse. "That's Longbow," he said, and he was not talking to Doran anymore. He was talking to all of them, to the whole line, to the years stacked up behind them. "That's the 840-meter cold bore on the wall. 1968. That is Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Vance." He pointed at the dark brass plaque at the base of the tower, the one every man there had walked past 1,000 times without slowing. His name has been bolted to this range since before a single one of you was born." The trainees turned and looked at the plaque and then back at the old man on the mat, and the whole long, cruel afternoon rearranged itself silently inside their heads. Boots came down the tower stairs fast. Lieutenant Colonel Pruitt, the school's commanding officer, 48 years old, and not a man anyone had ever seen hurry, was hurrying now. He had been watching the whole thing from behind the tower glass. He crossed to the firing point, and he looked from the old man to the plaque, and back to the old man again. And then Lieutenant Colonel Pruitt did a thing his Marines had never once seen him do for any living soul. He came to attention, and he saluted the old man on the ground first. "Marines," Pruitt said, and his voice cracked the silence like a rifle shot of its own. "On your feet. You are standing in the presence of a Navy Cross. Render honors. Now." And the line stood. Doran's face went through all of it in stages for everyone to witness. Confusion first. This is a setup. This is a bit. Somebody's filming a prank. Then disbelief, as his eyes found the plaque and actually read it. Then recognition, as the record line he had walked past for 2 solid years finally meant something. Then horror, pure and total and bottomless, as he understood what he had said, and to whom he had said it, and that a trainee's phone had filmed every last second of it. He came to attention dead last of all, a full beat behind his own students, and his salute trembled in the air in front of him. The old man, still prone in the dirt, quietly safed the rifle, and did not look up at any of them. Lieutenant Colonel Pruitt got the old man up onto his feet himself, a steady hand beneath his arm, and the line held its attention until the colonel told them at last to stand easy. And even then, no one quite relaxed, because you do not relax inside a moment that you already know you are going to be living off of for the rest of your career in the Corps. Pruitt turned to Doran, and his voice dropped low, which was far worse than loud. "Sergeant, you are relieved off this relay as of right now. Report to the tower. You and I are going to have a very long conversation about who instructs United States Marines on my range, and about exactly what comes out of their mouths while they do it." He let that hang in the air a moment. "Get out of my sight before I say something that ends up written down in your record book." Doran went gray beneath the tan. 2 years of careful reputation, gone in the space of one afternoon, on video, in front of the very students who had laughed at his jokes an hour ago, and would now never quite manage to meet his eye again. He took a step toward the tower, and then another. The swagger drained entirely out of him. A young man learning in real time that the floor he had built his whole certainty upon had never once been a floor at all. Only a painted curtain hung over a long drop. "Colonel?" It was the old man. Vance had recovered his cap and his breath, and he stood now with the borrowed rifle's spent brass still closed in his weathered hand, and he was looking at Doran's retreating back. "Don't break him over this," he said. "I'd take it as a personal favor if you didn't." Pruitt turned, frowning. "Sir, with respect, he disrespected you in front of—" "I know exactly what he did. I was here for all of it." The old man's voice was mild and entirely without heat, the voice of a man discussing somebody else's weather. "I've been 26 years old, Colonel. I was a great deal worse than him at 26, and I had a loaded rifle in my hands the whole time I was being worse. He's a good shot, this one. I watched him all afternoon underneath all that noise he makes. He's quick, and he's got the eye for it. The real eye. The kind you can't teach into a man. He just hasn't been humbled yet. And a man who's never once been humbled is no earthly use to you on the morning it finally counts." He looked at Doran, who had stopped walking, who was listening now with his back still half turned, afraid to turn the rest of the way around. Let him learn it standing up on his own 2 feet. We were every one of us him once. The ones worth keeping are only ever the ones who learn it, and then choose to stay. Honor the ones who carry it in silence, Subscribe to the Veteran Vault and let this old man's story find the people who need it. Pruitt looked at the old man for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly. Because you do not stand on a range and argue with a Navy Cross who is quietly asking you for mercy on behalf of the very man who insulted him. Sergeant Doran, he said, you'll instruct under direct supervision, pending review, and you will thank the gunnery sergeant on your way past because he just saved your career, which is a good deal more than you managed to do for it yourself today. The old man waved even that off, already turning away from all of them, and he walked, slowly, unhurried, the way he had done every single thing that whole long day, across the line toward the dark brass plaque at the base of the tower. The trainees parted to let him through without being told to. He stood before the plaque and read his own name, and the record cut in beside it, and the call sign in the parentheses that had once frozen an entire valley solid in the gray light. Then he raised 2 weathered fingers, and he touched, not his own name, but the line cut in beneath it. A second name, smaller in the brass, the spotter's name that some range master long before Okafor had ordered cut in beside the shooters, because the men who built this wall had understood a thing the trainees were only now beginning to learn. My name's the one on this wall, the old man said, and Marquez and Doran and the rest had drifted close enough now to hear him say it. But the shot was his, too. He read the wind for me that morning. He always read the wind. His thumb moved slowly over the small cut letters of the name. You don't make it alone, son. Not the shot. Not any of it. Not one part of any of it. You never have and you never will. Don't you let anybody on God's earth ever tell you different. Doran, chastened past speaking, came and stood quietly at his shoulder, and this time he did not perform, and he did not joke, and he did not rush to fill the silence with the sound of his own voice. He listened. It was, perhaps, the first genuinely useful thing the young man had done all day. The old man settled his faded cap back down square on his head, declined the colonel's offer of a ride and an escort out to his truck, and walked off the range the same way he had walked onto it, quietly, unbowed, already half forgotten by the wind that closed in behind him over the grass. And behind his retreating back, Sergeant Cole Doran came slowly to attention and rendered him a salute that was, this time, exactly correct in every line of it, and held it until the old man had gone all the way out the gate and was lost to sight. Some warriors fade quietly into the years, but the valor never leaves them. Honor the ones who carry it in silence. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to the Veteran Vault for more.